Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in Lamsa's webinar series. My name is Sasha Chehab. I'm 23 years old. I am one of the Lebanese Association of Medical Services for Addiction Ambassadors. I graduated with a BA in psychology, and I'm currently enrolled in the Compassionate Inquiry Professional Training for Counseling by Dr. Gabor Mate, from which I gathered most of the information in this presentation. I'm also a research assistant at the Lebanese American University and volunteering with Be Brave Beirut as an emotional support provider. So thanks again for joining us today. Today's topic is family drug support. So basically how to support and help a family deal with a drug or substance addiction. I want to start with a quote that really changed my perspective on so many levels, which is, there comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they are falling in. Because for me, really, the best way to help a person in any given situation is to first understand them and the situation that they're in. This is why I decided to start the presentation by defining addiction and explaining some of the reasons addiction may arise or develop. So we're going to start by brainstorming together. I'm going to ask you 2 questions to which you can answer in the chat box by yes or no. So the first one is, do you think that marijuana, alcohol, or cocaine are addictive?
I'm pretty sure they are. Just a different degree, أكيد.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, do you think that shopping, gambling, work, sports are addictive?
I think it's the feeling.
Sorry?
I think it's the feeling that's addictive, right? It's the satisfaction that's addictive. That whether, yeah. But yes, it's addictive.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for your answers. We're going to answer these shortly. But for the sake of this webinar's topic, I'm going to focus on drugs mainly. So basically, if any of the substances mentioned in the first question is really in itself addictive, how come we're not all addicted to alcohol per se, if we've all had it or tried it at some point in our lives? So really, the answer to the question, are these substances addictive, yes or no, is yes and no. Because the addictive power does not reside in any substance, but depends on the individual, which explains why some people try the same substances, such as alcohol, and some of them develop a dependency and others don't. So as we said, there are people using these substances for recreational purposes with no addictive effects whatsoever, such as on weekends with friends, to relax after a long day of work, to celebrate, etc. And there are other people using the same substances in an addictive manner, in a more dependable and consistent way and more regularly. So they might lie to use because it's frowned upon. They might steal to be able to buy drugs. They might ditch family and friends gathering to get high. They would isolate themselves and so on. So if we notice here, the individual using a certain drug finds a pleasurable feeling for a short period of time when they're high or drunk or whatever, depending on the substance that they're using, and face undesirable and damaging outcomes later on, such as having to lie, isolate themselves, maybe steal, let alone the physiological health problems that the drug might have on their bodies. So if we were to define addiction, it would sound like a behavior, substance-related or not, that a person craves, engages in, finds a temporary pleasure or relief in, and suffers negative consequences in the long term, and still are unable to give it up. So basically, it's craving, using, pleasure or relief, negative consequences in the long term, and inability to give it up. So the key term here is really inability. I just want to focus your attention here a bit because there are a lot of misconceptions around addiction, and the most famous ones are the following: that addiction is a choice that a person makes, addiction is a lack of willpower, addiction is a genetic inherited disease, so if we inherit the genes, we are bound to develop addiction later on in life, and that addiction is incurable because it's inherited in the genes and therefore there's nothing that can be done about it. So these are all misconceptions and are untrue. I'm going to explain now what addiction is all about and why certain people are more prone to develop addiction or addictive behaviors more than others. So as I said in the beginning of the presentation, to be able to understand a given situation is really to be curious about it. So how to approach a person suffering from addiction? First and foremost, we should approach them from a non-judgmental and compassionate place and be really curious as to understand why they are using. We can start by asking, what does it do to you? And what is really the positive effect that you get from it in the short term? Because I personally believe that no one engages in a certain behavior if it only and only has negative outcomes or consequences. So if we were to ask people suffering from addiction these questions, we would most of the time get answers like, it helps me escape from undesirable situations and feelings, so relief. It helps me focus when I need to and I'm not able to. It helps me calm down. It helps me feel more connected to the people around me and to feel happier or excited about certain situations in my life. So basically, escape, focus, connection, relief, excitement, etc. I mean, who wouldn't want to feel these things in their daily lives? I don't think anyone here would argue that we don't need these in our lives. And I said need because it is really, really, really difficult to continue life without these effects. So these are normal human aspirations, and to want them is actually normal. So what's the problem here? The real question is what happened to the individual that they feel so disconnected or so unable to focus. So the human brain develops in interaction with the environment. We are not born with the actual brain systems and pathways related to connection, focus, regulation, pleasure, excitement, etc. Rather, we are born with the potential for them to develop. And according to research, the most important critical influence on the physiological development of the human brain is the mutual responsiveness of adult-child relationship. So basically, how the parent is able to connect with the infant and the infant's needs is the dominant influence on the development of all these brain pathways related to connection, focus, pleasure, excitement, etc. And what I mean here by connection and responsiveness is not how much a parent loved their children, but how attuned and receptive they were to the emotional and physiological needs of their children. So a child exposed to even one adverse childhood experience is at a high risk of not developing the proper brain pathways and mechanisms that we need as human beings. And by adverse childhood experiences, I mean any kind of physical, sexual, emotional abuse towards the child or one of the parents, emotional and physical neglect toward the child, a parent suffering from a mental illness or exposed to severe and acute stress during pregnancy and early childhood years, divorce, a parent sent to jail, and death of a parent. So again, a parent might love their children more than themselves sometimes, but because of certain situations or stresses, they might not be able to attune to their children's needs as much as is needed in order to attain a healthy brain development. Because, for example, when the mother is stressed, the infant is stressed as well. So the architecture of the brain is constructed through an ongoing process that begins before birth, continues into adulthood, and establishes either a sturdy or a fragile foundation for all the health, learning, and behavior that follow. So the brain development depends upon the interaction of the genes and the environment, not the genes, but the effect of the environment on the genes. So the developing brain is critically influenced by the mutual responsiveness of adult-child relationships, particularly in early childhood years. So what we're talking about here is attunement, and this is what shapes the physiology of the brain. For example, there's one study that looked at EEGs, electroencephalograms, which are the readouts of the neurological and electrical activity of the brain. So basically, they looked at EEGs of 6-month-old infants whose mothers had postpartum depressions, and they compared it to the EEGs of 6-month infants whose mothers were not depressed. And what they found, and they basically, they could tell from the EEG of the infants whose mother was depressed and whose wasn't. So it's that specific, really. And that's because a depressed mother, it's not that they don't love their children, it's that they don't have the capabilities and the abilities to attune with the child. So to say that parents really love their kids is a given. The issue here is not whether they feel love for their child. The issue is really, are they able to attune with the child from a loving place? So these people whose brain physiology has been affected by any of the reasons that I just mentioned are therefore carrying a lot of emotional pain, and their physiology is not fully balanced, so they are more prone to develop addiction later on. And that's what addiction is all about. It's not an inherited genetic disease. It's not a lack of willpower. It's a physiological and psychological compensation for life stresses. So again, when we ask if a substance is addictive, yes or no, the answer is yes and no. It really depends on who uses it and for what purpose. So back to our topic, how to support a family exposed to addiction. First and foremost, help them understand that the problem is not an individual one, rather it's a family matter. Help them understand and be curious about the person who is suffering from addiction. Help them understand what they're trying to get out of using. Help them understand that it was really in the first place an attempt to solve a problem, such as an inability to focus, to feel connected, to feel pleasure, joy, excitement, to escape from unbearable life stresses and pain. Help them see that it is not a choice that they're doing, hence not blaming them for not being able to give it up. And really help them see and believe that the person is still inside somewhere behind all of these destructive behaviors, because they are. Also, I want to shed light on some misconceptions that I encountered during my work with Lebanese families in these situations. So I'm going to read them in Arabic. The first one is أعطيناه كل شيء. ليه عم بيعمل فينا هيك? So basically, we gave him everything. Why is he doing this to us? So here we have to help the family or the parent understand that the person is suffering more than they are as a family or parents, and that what they're going through is not about us or the parents, but about them and their experiences. Which leads us to another important point, which is we shouldn't pour our own expectations on them. For example, if we took them to ex-psychologist or to rehab, then they're supposed to get better. Each person has their own path, their journey, so we're not supposed to make it our own. Another one is ليش هو هيك وإخواته مش هيك? So basically, why is he like this and not his siblings? Here, I want to explain something. While it is true that siblings share environments as a result of growing up in the same family or household, such as same parents, same socioeconomic status, same school, etc., they might, and in most cases they do, develop very different personalities. And this is due to what is called the non-shared environments of each child, which are the result of being born at different times, having different temperaments, which is taba in Arabic, which is basically something that we are born with, and therefore siblings might react differently to similar situations. They might have different roles and expectations in the family according to their place, if they're the firstborn, for example, or gender differences, and the list goes on. Also, we have to be careful of the denial of the situation. شو صار له فجأة? So basically, what happened to him all of a sudden? He was doing fine. Except there are a lot of cues that show us that the person is not doing okay, but we tend to deny them until we can't anymore. Another important thing that I want to address is that addiction is a family matter, even if it only directly affects one particular person. The whole family is affected in one way or another. So for the families and peers that are supporting the person suffering from addiction, I extremely recommend to take care of themselves during the whole process, because assisting someone suffering from any mental illness is really draining. It's like the example that most of us know in the airplane. It is always advised to put our own air mask first before trying to help anyone, even our own children, because if we're drained from oxygen, then we're not doing any good, and we're not actually being able to help anyone anymore, not ourselves, not the people that we want to help or support. So I want to read a quote from my teacher that I respect a lot and who taught me a lot, which is, whatever you do out there in the world, do an equal amount of work internally, because if you don't, your work in the world will not be as effective. So to conclude, addiction is not a choice. Addiction is not a lack of willpower. Addiction is not a genetic inherited disease. While it might be true that some of us have some kind of genetic predispositions, a child reared in a healthy, stress-free environment with attuned, loving, and responsive parents has as much a chance of not developing addiction as a child with zero genetic predispositions, which is a very, very low percentage. So addiction is basically a physiological and psychological compensation for life stresses. Addiction is curable with the right interventions in a safe environment. Everything is possible, even if the adverse childhood experiences affected the brain development early on. There is something called neural plasticity, which is the ability of the nervous system to change the activity and connections in response to intrinsic or extrinsic stimuli, such as a change in environment into a healthier one, of course, long-term therapy, meditation, prayers, physical activity, yoga, etc. So really reach out for help. There are people out there who can support you and your loved ones. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to leave the floor. If anyone has any questions, you can either unmute or put it in the chat box. So,
Hey, Sasha.
Yeah.
Stan, we met at the Soteria meetings, and then I found this on LinkedIn the other day, and I'm happy to join you.
Thank you so much for joining.
I'm happy to see you doing this work. It's a very complicated process. What goes on? Everybody's addiction is unique, and is both sometimes maybe more than genetic sort of predispositions, but epigenetic changes, the stresses their parents have gone through and so on, and has set us up for certain behaviors later on in life, certain responses to life. My mom went through the Second World War, was a prisoner of war, was repatriated to another land and never learned language. And she developed schizophrenia. And I believe that gene that she carried predisposed me to become an addict. So, and to suffer some other mental health conditions. But for everybody, there's a different story. For for us as family members, it's very hard because we have so much emotional investment in the
That's
people
true.
that we love, and we also carry a lot of judgment. We both carry a lot of weight on ourselves. What did I do wrong? You know, that created this result. And if you spend time with Gabramate, you know his story. He only suffered a little bit of a distancing from his mother in his very earliest stages, and yet it led him to a lifetime of depression and another form of addiction, you know, that
Yeah,
he still struggles with even at this time.
I know.
But that's also one of the things about recovery, about getting sober, is if a person is curious and really wants to live. And, you know, I've worked with people, I've been sober for 30 years, but I started my own recovery a long time ago in 1983. I was 33 years old then, and I was an alcoholic, and just my life almost ended. And what happened is I realized I really want to live. I really want my life back. And everybody I know who has begun recovery, that's their starting point. I want to live, you know.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a quote, by the way, that he always read. Wait, I'm gonna just find it and read it to you. Just give me a second. Okay, so here it is. So it's basically, he says, your conflicts or the difficult things, the problematic situations in your life are not chance or haphazard. They are actually yours. They are specifically yours, designed specifically for you by a part of you that loves you more than anything else. The part of you that loves you more than anything else has created roadblocks to lead you to yourself. You are not going in the right direction unless there is something pricking you in the side, telling you, look here, this way. That part of you loves you so much that it doesn't want you to lose the chance. It will go to extreme measures to wake you up. It will make you suffer greatly if you don't listen. What else can it do? That's its purpose. So I think that that's the part of you that was trying to wake you up.
Yes, yes, we want to live. That's why we're born, is to live. We don't make our choices. I've had a lot of friends, and I've said this myself. Why me? You know, why do I have to suffer like this? You know, but then I know that so many people, you know, we each get our own suffering, and but the joy comes in overcoming and getting through this and moving forward. So I don't want to take up too much time, but it's really nice to see you there doing that work. For me, the hope lies in you guys and you young people who are taking this the next step, and it gives me hope because I guess you believe that the world's going to be around long enough for you to become
Hopefully.
leaders. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for joining. Anyone else has anything to share? So thank you so much, guys, for joining, and see you soon.
Thank you, Sasha. It was very insightful and it was very good.
Thank
thank
you.
you. Very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha. I hope we stay in touch. We are now linked on LinkedIn and and you have my email as well. I actually developed a course here for family members. We've had a big problem where I live with methamphetamine, crack cocaine, and then opiates. But about 5 years ago, methamphetamine showed up and became a huge problem in the community. So I had all these family members coming to me. I was working in a community resource center. And okay, thank you for extending that. So I developed a 6-week course for family members. If you're interested, I'll be happy to share it with you.
Yes, of
we
course.
had
I would love that.
we had different results. My approach has always been, you know, I know that your son has a problem or your brother, but I know that because of that, you have a problem too. I
Mhm.
can help you. I may not necessarily be able to help them, but I can help you. You know, we all get sick together. It's very much a family illness. So, and you have to be well in order to support the person who you love.
That's
So,
true.
it's sort of the premise, you know, for this thing. So, again, I don't want to tie this up, but it's really nice to see
I
you.
would really
Everyone-
love to join you. If you can send me the details by email, please.
Sure. Yes,
Thank
I
you
will.
so much.
I will get in touch in the next couple of days, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Peace.
Bye.